Okay, I'm going to start it off. I'm Mayor Doug Holmes, for those who don't know me. I'm going to pretend this is a really crowded
We'll move around.
So first, thanks for coming out. This is the open house for the proposed 2026 utility budget. So council, we've completed our deliberations on all three of the utilities, so water, water, sewer, and the electrical. So first, I should point out that municipalities are legally required to balance all their budgets, so we can't run a deficit the way the federal and provincial governments can. And so while inflation may be easing, we continue to see escalating construction costs as well as price increases for many really specialized components that are required in all three of the utilities. So in order to keep rate increases down, we've been looking everywhere we can to find cost savings. So for example, we've switched from using chlorine gas to less expensive sodium hypochlorite for our water treatment. And we've increased storage space for coagulant at the water treatment plant, which allows us to order larger quantities at a bulk price. So these two measures alone, those two things, have saved us more than $100,000 a year. And thanks goes out to our staff at the water treatment plant for identifying these efficiencies that we've been able to deploy. However, there's only so much cost cutting we can do. The utilities are heavily regulated, and our rates must take into account provincial legislation in respect to public health and environmental protection. And so reducing service levels really isn't an option for the utilities. We can't kind of partially treat drinking water, we can't partially treat sewage, we can't supply electricity only at certain times of the day. So like other municipalities, Summerland has been dealing with an infrastructure deficit after many years of not adequately budgeting for capital replacement costs. 10 years ago, council of the day started replenishing its depleted reserves with small rate increases, and we're now able to undertake some long overdue investments in our core infrastructure, and you've probably seen us tearing up the roads and fixing those water mains. But while we're making progress, there's still many worn out pipes and obsolete components that need to be replaced. At the same time, there's demand for more and better infrastructure to address population growth, climate change, and higher health and safety standards. With these considerations, Council is proposing to increase water rates next year by 6.77%, of which 5% is for an increase to the amount we put away in reserves for future infrastructure investments. We're proposing a 5.73% increase to sewer rates, of which 3.5% is for reserve contributions. And we're proposing to increase electrical rates by 6.22%. The two main reasons being a 4.78% Fortis wholesale rate increase, that's the amount we have to pay Fortis for electricity, and also a $150,000 increase to the dividends that we pay ourselves to the general fund, which we'll use to help offset the increase in property taxes. We're not planning any additional contributions to the electrical reserve, which is already benefiting from an annual allocation of $1.2 billion. However, not allocating more to the water and sewer funds would soon put those reserves back into deficit, and that would necessitate more borrowing in the future for future infrastructure renewal. So the proposed 2026 utility budgets are designed to ensure our core infrastructure remains in good shape so that we can continue providing that clean water and treating our sewage and reliably supplying electricity. So I'll now turn it over to Dave Stolichny, the Director of Finance for the District of Summerland, to provide details of each of the proposed utilities.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. And to all of you in attendance, good evening and welcome to our 2026 utility budgets and rates in-person open house. And I normally make a funny joke usually during one of my presentations, so today's joke is going to be, for the people in the back, I'm sorry it's standing remotely. I really hope you can hear me. But as the mayor noted, my name is David Stolichny, and I'm the Director of Finance here at the District of Summerland. So my job over the next 30 to 45 minutes is to guide you through the 3 months of utility budgets meetings and highlight how those meetings have shaped the 2026 utility budgets and rate increases. So our agenda today, we're going to touch on 3 main components. The first one being asset management, the financial budgets themselves, and then we'll finish off with the proposed 2026 utility rate increases and the overall impact they have on a typical house. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the factors that need to be considered when putting together a budget or a financial plan. So for starters, is it a new project? Is it existing? If it's new, does it require additional resources? Another one is provincial and federal regulatory requirements often force municipalities into additional expenses, be it from a health and safety perspective or additional testing, and often will limit with little to no input from the municipality itself. This is especially prevalent in water utility with all of the regulatory requirements around drinking water. When reviewing potential projects, we also need to look at the risks associated with the project, as well as the potential consequences of not moving forward with that project. Projects with high risks and high consequences are the first ones to move forward through the budgeting process. As the mayor noted, it's difficult to cut costs by reducing service levels in utilities. We can't partially treat drinking water, as you noted, or partially treat sewage. However, we do receive requests from residents and developers to increase service levels throughout the year. And one of the most common service level requests we receive is from the electrical users wanting to increase their electrical services. Funding options definitely affect the budget. How will we fund the increased level of service, the new project, or the new regulatory requirement? Should it come from the actual users of that service? If it benefits a portion of the community, should it be funded through a parcel tax only on those properties that are benefiting from that service? Are there grants available? Do we need to borrow money? There are numerous factors to consider in this area. And the final factor noted is one we're all dealing with on a daily basis: inflation and market conditions. We continue to see high demand for goods, which is causing price escalations. Couple this with interest rates that have not come back yet to pre-COVID levels, and both of those factors have impacted the proposed budget. So all 6 of these factors, and there's numerous more, along with council's strategic priorities, drive the final financial plan and ultimately the utility rates Summerland residents are charged. So assets are the core of our 3 utilities. Without functioning assets, the district could not provide the vital services that each utility delivers. So the next 3 slides are going to provide some overall context into the amount of assets needed to provide utility services to Summerland residents. So in the electrical utility, we have 2 substations, 9 feeders, 1,500 transformers. One that caught me was 280 kilometers worth of overhead conductor and 1,350 streetlights. On the sewer side, we have 80 kilometers of pipe, 3,500 services, a wastewater treatment plant and 8 lift stations. And on the water side, 220 kilometers of pipe, 6,400 services, 11 reservoirs, a treatment plant, some PRV stations, and in-ground storage tanks. So there's a lot of assets that we need to maintain in order to provide those services to our residents. So the first topic we're going to touch on is asset management, and the Mayor has touched on it already. But in 2019, Council did approve the district's asset management policy, as well as our asset management strategy. These strategies have identified the importance and need of increasing capital reserves that historically were extremely low. At that time, Council committed to annual 3.5% rate increases in sewer and 5% rate increases in water as direct transfers to the respective capital reserves. Now, as a result of Council's thoughtfulness and commitment, reserve levels have steadily begun to increase. In contrast, our estimated 2019 replacement cost of all of our utility infrastructure was $360 million. And that was based on the work that was done in 2019. Also at that time, it was estimated that our utility deficit was projected to be over $86.5 million. Now, considering recent inflationary pressures and global market conditions over the last 5 years, it's fair to say that these amounts have increased substantially since the work was completed. And as staff, we will be recommending to Council that an update of these plans during their next strategic priorities discussion occurs. So although positive strides have been made over the years to increase reserve levels, significant investment is still required to support the long-term needs of the community, especially as we continue to see escalating construction costs. So what does that actually mean? Council's asset management commitment looks like this in dollars. The table shows us not only how compounding has helped district reserve levels over the years, but it also illustrates how Council's commitment has been shaping these reserves. So organizationally, Council has quadrupled the amount of funds allocated to utility reserves over this 7-year span, and in total will have allocated $10.97 million into reserves over this period. Now, this is a huge step in the district's overall asset management journey, and the effects of these decisions will be discussed further when we look at each of the 5 individual capital plans later in our presentation. So the first utility that we're going to look at today is also our largest in terms of its operational budget size, the electric utility. So the district is one of 5 municipalities in BC that operates its own electric utility. We purchase wholesale power from Fortis BC and sell it to our residents. Some of the services or cost centers associated with the electric utility are administration, which is budgeted at $2.3 million. The electric power we buy from Fortis, which is $11.77 million. System maintenance, $1.6 million. Asset management, $1.2. Dividend to the general fund is $650,000, as well as our metering is $292,000. So in all, the 2026 budget for these services is budgeted at $17.8 million, which of course the largest amount being the $11.8 million that we pay to Fortis for our power. You'll have seen this chart around. When we look at revenue for the electrical utility, the majority of revenue being collected, which is 95.7%, is coming from user fees that total $17 million. Now this is very common in utilities where primary revenue sources are the fees that the users pay. On the expense side, our overall expenses in the electric utility have increased 5.13%, or $867,000 over last year. And as is the case every year, the major driving force behind that increase is Fortis BC's wholesale power costs. We have budgeted for a 4.78% Fortis rate increase, which based on estimated 2026 consumption has increased our wholesale power budget by $394,000. So on the last slide, we touched on the major driving force behind this year's budget increase, which of course was the Fortis wholesale power cost. This slide provides more detail on some of the other factors that make up the rest of the major budget changes. So the first one underneath Fortis there is the vegetation brushing. The district did minimal brushing this year, as a significant amount was done in 2024. Now, 2 years removed, the plan is to survey and procure a brushing contractor in the coming year to ensure we don't fall behind in this important maintenance. The second item to note is that council is proposing to increase the dividend that the electric utility pays to the general fund by $150,000. So the general fund invests these funds directly into the community by supporting the general operations of the municipality. Additionally, this dividend provides a reduction in property taxes that would otherwise need to be collected from homeowners. So based on last year's revenues, this equates to 4.27% tax rate increase that would be required if there was no dividend at all. The third item to note is the general fund administration charge. So during last year's budget deliberations, a decision was made to index the electrical utilities admin charge back 10 years, as it had not changed over that time period. However, costs had changed. So this $86,000 increase is a continuation of last year's indexing decision. And spoiler alert, this is not the last time you will be discussing the administration charge, as it does impact the other two utilities as well. And the final note is our contractual operational increases. So the district has several contractual obligations that we've entered into spanning different lengths of time, all of which have built-in contractual increases. These contracts include union and employment agreements, a janitorial servicing agreement, and an engineering consulting agreement, just to name a few. So the cumulative increase of these agreements on the 2026 budget equates to approximately $62,000. So the district's proposed 2026 capital plan consists of 11 capital projects totaling $4.8 million. The Wharton Underground project, which is budgeted at $1.47 million, combined with 3 equipment purchases that are budgeted at $1.6 million, make up the bulk of the overall capital program, or 73% of it. So I'm going to pass the presentation over to Jeremy Storvold now, who's the Director of Utilities, who's going to provide some more detailed information on the individual projects that you see on the screen. How's it going?
Thank you, Dave. That was a wonderful start to the presentation. Okay, so we'll just go line by line here. So for capital for electric utility, we're going to first off replace a couple of line trucks. These trucks are the vehicles that the line crew uses to build new power line, underground power line, and they're specialized trucks. So they're kind of a special order, custom built, and because they have to meet certain voltage thresholds, so you can actually work on that line live. Our line crew does live power line work where they put rubber gloves on it. They actually handle that power line, so you need proper boom, insulated boom, things like that in order to do that work. So it's highly specialized, and it is a major line item in our capital budget. Fiber system upgrades. So Silverline does own a small fiber network where we connect some of our assets together. In particular, this fiber system upgrade is to replace some of the rotten poles and give us some more spacing on some of our poles out towards the landfill and the water treatment plant. That's to move those assets along with some pump hoses and that onto our fiber network. The polar tensioner trailer This is a trailer that is used to build power line. Currently, we don't own one of these currently. We actually borrow Penticton's, and they said that they have enough work that they don't want to loan that to us going forward. So we do need to procure our own. The Penticton Electric Utility and the Summerland Electric Utility, we actually work quite closely together. Sometimes we're even on call for each other. So it's a good relationship there, but we can't always borrow their equipment, and we even have one of their line trucks currently. So the Fuller Tensioners helps us build power line and pull cable underground. Service connections and capacity upgrades, this is just a line item that we use to allocate funds towards new upgrades that people request. The inventory storage upgrades, this is for a yard near our works yard. To flatten that out so we can use that for additional storage. The Wharton Underground upgrades, so most people in Summerland have seen all the work that's going on here. This year that's the civil work, and so next year we'll start actually wiring that new underground system up. So there's a capital line item there. Then we have voltage conversion. This is an important long-term project for Summerland. Summerland uses a legacy voltage for our power system. So it costs us a little bit more for equipment for that voltage, so we're slowly building everything to a higher voltage level, which is kind of a standard voltage across Canada. And so that's what that project is there. And then pole replacements is just replacing rotten poles throughout the district. Dave, over to you.
Thanks for that riveting presentation, Jeremy. I appreciate that. In terms of reserves, so this slide shows our projected reserve and surplus levels over the next 5 years based on the proposed capital plan that Jeremy just spoke to, and that's in the room. This also takes into account Council's current commitment of allocating $1.2 million into the electric reserve annually. So it takes both of the money coming in and the money going out. However, unlike the water and sewer utilities, no additional asset management contributions are proposed for 2026. And as this table shows, the financial plan is fully funded for the first 4 years with a small deficit in 2030. So that takes care of the electrical utility. The second utility we're going to talk about today is our wastewater, or more commonly known as the sewer utility. So the sewer utility's primary cost centers include administration, which is budgeted at $550,000. Sewage collection is $185,000. Sewage treatment, $1.1 million. Sludge disposal is $366,000. Asset management, $588,000. And debt charges of $295,000. So in all, the 2026 budget for these services is proposed at $3.06 million. Again, when we look at sewer revenues, the majority of the revenue being collected, which is 92.5%, is coming from user fees and parcel taxes, that total $2.83 million. And again, like the electric utility, this is very common in utilities, where the primary revenue source are the fees, the user fees that we use to pay. On the expense side, sewer expenses have increased 4.43%, or $129,000 over the prior year budget. And the next slide will provide the four most significant factors. So the first one, which we touched on already in the electric utility, is the general fund administration charge. So again, during last year's utility budget deliberations, Council made the decision to index the electric utilities admin charge back 10 years. Due to other significant operational pressures in those sewer and water utilities, indexing those fees was not proposed last year. However, from an equity and fairness perspective that each utility should be paying its fair share, this budget proposes to index this charge back over the same time period as last year. So following the decision of Council in the electric utility as well. So the second item on the screen relates to debt payments. Debt payments have decreased as one of our debentures has been paid off, and another one is going to be paid off in 2026. The third note relates to the sewer treatment plant, and specifically materials and supplies within the sewer treatment plant. When we reviewed our historical actuals over the last 3 to 4 years, it's become very apparent that we have been significantly under budgeting in this line item. So the increase in this budget is just to bring that amount more in line with our historical actuals, and a large component of that is due to our chemical costs. And the final item of note, which we've touched again on already, is an increase in our asset management contributions. The proposed budget does include a 3.5% rate increase specific for asset management, and that works out to an increase of $67,400 on the expense side of things. On the capital side, the district's proposed 2026 capital plan consists of 5 capital projects, which total $4.8 million. So 2 of these projects, the primary clarifier and connecting community sewer expansion, make up 69% or $3.3 million of that plan. So I will once again pass things over to Jeremy to talk about the detailed projects themselves.
Thanks again, Dave. So starting at the top here, primary clarifier. This is an absolute critical part of the wastewater treatment process. So currently the wastewater plant has 1 primary clarifier. If we were to build that plant today, following today's regulations, we would have to have 2, because that part of the process can't be shut down. And so we can't shut it down to assess and maintain that very large piece of equipment. And so we haven't done that since it was built 25 years ago. So we're adding a second clarifier so we can move that untreated waste water when it comes into the plant into the second clarifier, drain the first clarifier, and conduct an assessment of that. So we'll jump inside there and have a look. And I've heard, Dave, that finance department volunteered to help us do that. Really? So get some coveralls. So that's what that project's about, and it's well on its way now, and it'll continue into next year. The liquid waste management plan. This project is a multi-year project to complete a plan that shows how Summerland's going to treat its liquid waste into the future. So it predicts how many people we have moving into the community and connecting onto that system, and what do we need for assets to be able to treat that liquid waste. Then we have a line item here for system expansion, and this we just keep this in here every year, and it's just in case part of the community comes forward and put up their hand and say, hey, we would like to expand sewer to our part of town. As long as I work here, we haven't actually used that, so no one's come forward to date. And then the next one down is our connecting community sewer expansion, so that's for if we do actually make an expansion of the collection system. And then the Headworks fine screen spare. In previous years, we replaced our Headworks fine screen. It's another one of these assets that has no redundancy, so we have to keep it in working order. So we ordered a replacement, put that in place, craned it in through the roof of the building, and now we've taken the one that was in place and we're going to refurbish it so that we have an on-the-shelf spare. So if that piece of equipment fails, again, it's a critical piece of equipment. There is no redundancy there. So when that one fails, we can swap it out quickly because we have one in stock on the shelf. And that concludes the capital.
Thank you. So as you can see, and as Jeremy noted, sewer projects are expensive, and they can range into millions and millions of dollars. Now, although council has made concerted efforts over the years in allocating additional funds into sewer reserves, in order to move one of the identified projects forward, borrowing will be required. The proposed capital plan includes a potential bioreactor, which totals $4.8 million. However, as the next 2 slides are going to show, Additional asset management contributions now go a long way in lowering what that proposed debt may need to be. So this slide is based again on the proposed 5-year capital plan, and it does take into account the additional 3.5% rate increase for 2026, which totals $67,400. So as the table shows, over this 5-year period, district's reserves will double up to $3.2 million. Now, however, as I alluded to in our last slide, that will most likely be fully utilized to lower the debt required to construct that bioreactor. So as I just mentioned, the previous slide just noted that it would have about $2.3 million in reserves, which will most likely be utilized to lower the borrowing on this bioreactor, which is a $4.8 million construction cost. So as the project is budgeted to be constructed in 2029, that means we will be required to go through a public assent process, which would be initiated around the second quarter of 2028. Now, should we receive electoral approval, estimated annual debt payments will be $205,000 annually, and they'd require a rate increase of approximately 10.64% and would cost a typical household about $50.66. So the actual borrowing would occur in the fall of 2029, and the debt payments and subsequent rate increases would start in 2030. So and it is important to note that these amounts have been calculated based on current pricing and interest rates, and of course will need to be adjusted as we get closer to that construction window. So this slide shows the impact of having positive reserve balances and how that impacts future project funding. So if we did not have any reserves to utilize on this project and had to fund the entire project with debt, our annual debt payments, rate increase required, and approximate annual increase to the typical household would pretty much double. So, and additionally, by using these reserve funds, projected interest payments over a 20-year borrowing will go from $4.4 million down to $2.3 million. So that's $2.1 million in interest rate payers will not have to pay due to council's annual commitment to asset management. Our final utility that we'll be chatting about today is our water utility. So the water utility's primary cost centers include administration, which is budgeted at $1 million, treatment $2.2 million, distribution is $1.4 million, debt charges are $1.4 million, and asset management are $1.4 million. Metering is $416,000, and our watershed expenses are just under $200,000. So in all, our 2026 budget for these services and these cost centers is proposed at $7.96 million. Just like our other two budgets, the proposed water utility budget is a baseline budget. The budget considers contractual increases, third-party rate increases, as well as operational projects that the council has approved. And when we look at revenue, the majority of the revenue being collected, which is 89.2%, is coming from user fees and parcel taxes that total $7.1 million. And again, like our other two utilities, it's a very common commonality. So on the expense side, our 2026 expenses are projected to actually decrease 2.3%, or $186,000. And our next slide will touch on the components of that decrease. So the first one, aside from pointing out the first bullet on the screen, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, as it's now the third time that it's come up today. The main highlight to note is that by indexing this administration chart back those 10 years, it has increased the budgeted amount by $111,000. The second item of note is a significant decrease in our chemical costs. So as the mayor noted in his opening remarks, staff at the treatment plant implemented two key changes in 2025 that had led to chemical cost savings. The first is we are piloting a sodium hypochlorite disinfection system, which has reduced the need for pH adjustment chemicals. And secondly, they have installed a third coagulant holding tank to enable bulk deliveries and lower unit costs. So these improvements have decreased budgeted chemical costs by $112,750. And they have enhanced system reliability, which should reduce future maintenance costs. The third item of note, which we've touched on previously again in this presentation, is the asset management contributions. So the proposed budget includes a 5% rate increase specific to asset management, and that calculates out to an increased contribution of $298,485. And the last item of note is related to debt payments, and it's made up of two different components. So firstly, the district, we have paid off a $479,000 debenture in 2025, which lowers overall debt payments required in 2026. This decrease also speaks to the corresponding decrease in water parcel tax revenues noted on the previous slide. So, I'll jump back. Our water parcel taxes, which are tied to our debt payments, have also decreased the second. Now, offsetting this debt reduction a little bit is a new debenture coming online in 2026 for the Victoria Road project. So this project received electoral approval in March of 2025. And now, however, due to a few external factors, this project was delayed and has been pushed back into 2026. So we are expecting the $850,000 water portion of the borrowing to be financed in the spring of 2026, so about 4 or 5 months. The only payment that's going to be required in 2026 is one interest payment of $19,857, and that payment requires a rate increase of 0.32%. Now, moving into 2027, our annual payments on this debt will be $61,000, and that will require an additional water rate increase of 0.7% in 2027 to cover those payments. On the capital side of things, the proposed 2026 capital plan consists of 15 projects that total $3.8 million. 50% of this spend is to upgrade the water main on Victoria Road, which is budgeted at $1.85 million. And it's funded through a $1 million grant that we received and the approved public borrowing of $850,000 that I just talked about. So Jeremy's here again to kind of talk through the projects themselves, and we'll come back to me.
Thanks again, Dave. Starting at the top, so we have some mobile equipment that we need to purchase for the water utility, includes a forklift and side-by-side. Side-by-side is not for joyriding. We need it to access our dams up in the upper watershed. We currently rent that. In particular, we have 2 dams that are very difficult to access, and so actually this will be a tracked side-by-side so we can access it in the wintertime. Then we have Thirst Dam safety improvements. This is to address items on our latest dam safety review. Some structural analysis, there's piezometer testing, pull-off tests, basically standard things for Thirst Dam. Then we have the dam safety upgrades, Headwaters and Garnet. So this is a regulatory requirement. It has to do with dam safety regulation changes, and we need to widen spillways at both of these assets. And we'll do some other upgrades while we're in there as well. Victoria Road System separation upgrade. Dave just mentioned this project, so this is the continuation of this project. It's also funded from the general fund for roads, but this is the water portion of that, and it goes to the roundabout. Lamella block replacement. This is in our water treatment plant. The lamella block, basically what it is it provides a laminar flow to our our water system in there as the water comes into that part of the process. It kind of slows the water down, and so it comes into that portion slowly and sort of steady, and that lamellar block is end of life and due for replacement. PRV above ground upgrades, the next PRV, Sean, I think is PRV 8. So that one will be installed this coming year before irrigation turn on. The water treatment plant upgrades, this is a list of items in the water treatment plant that we're going to address. Typical rebuilds, pump and motor type of things. This next year we'll be focusing on our mixers. Then we have our source water protection plan. This is an important plan as part of our water treatment license. We need to work on this plan and complete this plan. It's to protect our source water. Cathodic protection. Some of our pipes in the ground need protection from corrosion. And so this is a system that uses a sacrificial anode. We apply a DC voltage to that, and it's sort of akin to, you'll see boat motors and that in the ocean. They'll have those sacrificial anodes bolted to the side. Basically, it pulls that corrosion to the sacrificial anode instead of the pipe, so it helps the pipes last longer. Garnet Ave water main replacement. This is just to replace water main on Garnet Ave. And same with Henry and Jubilee Road water main replacements. That's all part of our roads and water master plan, and this is the water portion of those projects.
Thank you. So before I jump into my next slide, I just want to provide a little bit of clarification. I did mention that in the water utility as well as the sewer utility, over the next little while, there'll be some debt coming online. And just from a clarification perspective, debt payments are paid by the users of the system. So when we're looking at the sewer system, if you're a property that isn't on sewer, you're on a septic tank or anything else, your property, of course, would not be paying those debt charges because you're not on the system. So it's only the users of the service that are actually paying for the debt components of these projects. With that said, this slide summarizes the district's proposed 5-year water capital plan, and it highlights the need for continued asset management investment. So as the slide shows, water projects are very expensive, and most of them range into the millions of dollars. And now, although, again, I've said this before, although council has made concerted efforts over the years in adding additional funds into water capital reserves, in order to move some of the identified projects forward, significant grant funding and borrowing is required. So the larger concern and the driving force behind continued asset management allocation increases is the fact that 74% of this plan requires funding from external sources. This puts a lot of the projects at risk of not moving forward, as we will be relying on third-party adjudicators reviewing grant applications and oversubscribed funding programs. So without increased reserve contributions, we will find ourselves at the mercy of these adjudicators, and if unsuccessful in grant applications, our only other avenue to get projects completed will be debt. So therefore, to try to lower the reliance on debt and grant funding, Council has proposed to increase the 2026 asset management contribution again by that 5%, which calculates out to just under $300,000, $298,000. Based on the proposed 5-year capital plan and proposed asset management contributions, the reserve levels in the water utility are projected to be the amounts here on the screen. And it is positive, as there is no deficit in this utility. So what does all this mean to you? What does the last 45 minutes of me standing up here actually mean to the 5 of you who showed up? Let me tell you. 6. Is there 6? Oh, what's the councilor? Sorry. Come on, I'm the finance guy, if I can't count to 5, we got a problem. So on the water side, the 6.77% rate increase equates to a $71.62 per year increase to the typical water, to the typical residential home. On the sewer side, a 5.73% rate increase equates to $27.28. And on the electric side, $117.54 increase. So annualized, it's a 6.32% rate increase when we take into account all three of these utilities, which works out to $214.76 or $17.90 per month. So this does conclude the District of Summerland's 2026 utility budget and rates open house. I do thank everyone who took the time to attend this evening. And before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to note that for any of you who wish to submit any written comments to council about this proposed budget and or the rate increases, please submit them to the email that's noted on your screen, budget@summerland.ca. To ensure that your comments do make it to council prior to them finalizing these rate increases, I would ask that you submit them sooner rather than later. November 20th at 5 p.m. is our deadline to ensure that we actually hit the council agendas. So with that, I will open up the floor to any questions that any of you may have. We do have a microphone, but there's not a lot of background chatter, so I'll probably speak your questions and we'll probably be able to hear them.
Okay, so I noticed the general fund admin charge.
Yes.
The way I understand it is that's a way to charge the users of those utilities for the overhead, the administration overhead.
Correct.
So you're trying to allocate that to the users.
Correct.
On the other hand, for the electrical, you're charging the users for general funds, that dividend. Those two don't kind of mirror each other. Why are we charging a profit, basically, from the utility to go into the general funds instead of charging people property tax for that? You just, the residents have to pay it one way or the other, but instead of charging based on assessed value of my property, you're charging me based on my utility use. That's not how we're supposed to tax people. We're supposed to tax them on their assessed value. But you've taken utility and you're charging us a tax on that. I don't agree with that.
Fair comment. So yes, so the $650,000 dividend is just that. It's an amount that, as we are the owner of, as you all are all owners of the electrical utility, the dividend is being paid to the general fund to offset taxation, is what's happening. Yes. It's a philosophical conversation and a discussion. Some people do agree with it, some don't. However, when we look at it, you mentioned it yourself, there is one taxpayer and the money either gets collected through the utility side of things or it gets collected from the taxation side of things. In this instance, because we are the owners of the utility, and to try to minimize property tax rate increases, the decision's been made to transfer an additional $150,000 from the utility to the general fund.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying, and I don't know,
You make one decision one way and then you make a decision that's contradictory to it. You're saying each utility should pay its overhead.
the administration charge is something totally different. So the administration charge relates to, so we're not Fortis, right? So we don't have, Fortis has its own CEO, they have their own accounting departments, they have all of those things. At the District of Summerland, we have one finance department that does the billing for water, sewer, electric, garbage, we do property taxes. So The administration charge is basically trying to take components of those positions and those functions and charge them back to the utilities. Because the majority of those costs are captured in the general fund. So for instance, my wage.
Yep.
My wage is captured in the general fund. Now I'm here at a utility budget open house, so part of my wage should be allocated to the utilities. So that's what those administration charges are. Billing the utilities from the general fund so that the time and the resources that are allocated to those utilities are properly captured and reimbursed to the general fund. The dividend, yeah, it's a totally separate. Which
But we're
may-
using our utility as to pay some of the taxes.
We are, yeah.
Yes, but you're not using the assessed value of property to determine who pays what. It's whoever uses the most electricity pays that tax. So the basis of charging the users doesn't make sense.
No, I understand your comments.
Okay, I think we've covered that. One other question though was, with the electricity, we have our solar panels. I didn't see any comments about how the solar panels have contributed to the electricity of the municipality. The cost savings to us on that.
You want to answer that one? Sure.
So for solar panels, there's no specific line item for solar panel revenue in the budget. The solar panel, the energy that the solar system generates is energy that we don't have to buy from Fortis or from a electric wholesaler. So that comes to about $30,000 a year in savings, in energy savings that we don't have to buy from Fortis. And so all we do is we estimate how much power we're going to buy from Fortis, and the $30,000 sort of disappears almost even as a rounding error because of the millions of dollars we spend with Fortis throughout the year. So our Fortis bill is about $1 million a month. So that's kind of the difference. So there's no specific line item showing revenue from the solar panels. They're just too small to really make a difference there. So they're providing revenue, or they're providing savings, but in the actual budget, there's no line item for there.
Right, so with the cost of those solar panels to the municipality, we can't kind of see the benefit, the cost benefit of what we've laid out to build that array.
There is the build-out, the capital funds for the build-out were mostly grant funded, but the O&M costs do have a separate line item built into the budget,
When we have the budget meeting.
in the O&M budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I ask a question.
I don't think I can say no to a counselor, so,
Well, the federal budget seems to be looking at providing more funding for sewer costs, for that kind of infrastructure. I know everything, when we write, you have to write a grant, you gotta, whatever chance you have of getting it is whatever chance you have of getting it. I'm just hoping that maybe there will be more money coming through because of that emphasis.
yeah, I haven't delved deep into the federal budget yet, but I keep hearing it's monumental, it's earth-shattering, it's going to provide so much money.
It's a forecast budget.
I'm really, really hoping that there's a bit of a change in how the federal government provides money to both the province and municipalities. As council's all aware, and as some people in the audience might also be aware, the grant program, applying for grants is challenging. We're always told they're oversubscribed, we're always told that there's not enough money, we're always told numerous things. So I'm really hoping that the feds maybe look at their funding programs and maybe move to more of an allocation-based system or what it might be, but until rubber hits the road, I don't really know what it's going to look like.
Can I ask Jeremy a question?
Oh, please do. Please.
That's great question.
They're just the ones that occurred to me this evening. Jeremy, would there ever be a time that we would look to do underground for our power lines? Would that ever be an efficiency in terms of capital costs and savings? I have no idea.
Yeah, so the question is, should we be burying more power lines? Is that,
Are there efficiencies to be said in doing that? Or whatever you might call it.
well, underground power lines cost a premium. And so in certain parts of town where you're going to see growth and development, for instance, along the street beside us here on Wharton, where the power lines could restrict growth, and that's what we are hearing from property owners downtown, where you have trouble going up in height for the building because the power lines are too close. So in cases like that, you could have a business case to dropping power lines underground. In Summerland, as far as the electric utility is concerned, it would be considered a rural utility, not a urban utility. So the majority of our assets in Summerland for the electric utility are farmland power line. And so in that case, you generally wouldn't bury that high voltage power line because of the cost and there's no benefit really out there. So generally speaking, overhead power line is the way to go for Summerland, unless it's downtown and there's a strategic reason for that.
Thank you.
I noticed on the slide, this is for you, I think you said we already had about 60 kilometers of buried power lines and 280 kilometers of above ground. And I thought, well, that seems like a lot of buried line already compared to where the heck is all this buried line? I can't see it.
That's good. That's the whole idea.
It's all down here. Yeah, and it's not linear feet or meters of power line. So the power line, there's 3 lines, and on Wharton Street there's 6. So the length of Wharton would be times by 6. That's how we.
That's how you did it?
Yeah.
That's cheap.
Yeah, it's cheap.
It's accounting and it's
It's also correct.
Just a question on these tariffs, how have they impacted utility budget? Has there been any impact?
Yeah, we did see some impact from tariffs. We were able to avoid some of the tariff issues. A good example is for our primary clarifier. The mechanism was coming from the U.S., so we actually moved manufacturing of that to Alberta, and we avoided all the tariffs on that. It cost us nothing to do that, so we were able to bring that into the country. And then in the water treatment plant, we moved some of our purchasing also to Edmonton, and we're buying chemicals sourced in Canada to avoid some of the higher costs there in the U.S. So yes, we are making operational decisions and doing what we can to avoid tariffs and to move some of that purchasing local, like within the country.
Didn't you also buy multiple transformers to multiply at a better price?
Transformers have been a whole other issue that hasn't been affected by tariffs. We haven't purchased transformers since this year, since the tariff issue has come into place. Our issue with transformers was more COVID, and the electric vehicles using up a lot of the core steel resource around the world. So price of transformers have come down significantly now, and mostly because Chinese manufacturing has met the North American standard, and those manufacturers are now selling successfully into North America. Generally speaking, we get our transformers from the U.S., but we also source them from Brazil and partially in Canada too. But most of the transformer manufacturing historically has been in the U.S.
shut her down? See, you're standing there.
You opened your.
Last chance? Questions?
Can you get a copy of your presentation, or will it be?
So, yeah, so our plan is, we're gonna check out the video quality just to see how that comes out. But if the quality is poor, well, we'll probably do an in-house recording. And it'll be uploaded onto our website, on the budget page.
Okay.
And then we'll splice in the questions.
Okay.
So give us 3-4 days,
Okay.
please. Perfect. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.